Beloved friend and Commissioner Murali Krishna sir, I request our chairperson A.B. Geeta to present a floral bouquet to him. We requested to address the gathering, but because of his pre-commitment in the department, he is moving. Thank you, madam. Now we'll start with the second technical session of the day on issues and insights of input tax credit. To handle this session, we have an eminent speaker, is none other than CA N.R. Badrinath. I request our chairperson A.B. Geeta to escort the speaker onto the dais and welcome with floral bouquet. Mr. Badrinath don't require any introduction, but still for the benefit of new members, I'll read out his brief profile. He is a fellow member of Institute. He's got over 15 years of experience. He specialized in indirect tax, comprising of Central Excise, Customs earlier, and GST now. He is a partner in Singhvi Dev and Unni, and a director at Accretive SDU Consulting Private Limited. He leads the indirect tax division at Singhvi Dev and Unni. He has been involved in conceptualizing, designing and implementation of tax efficient business models for large organizations and diversified industry verticals. He regularly represents clients before the indirect tax appellate authorities, including the tax tribunals. He has made representations to the state government and central government on various occasions. He was previously a faculty for indirect taxation at MATS Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship and the Bangalore branch of ICA for indirect taxes committee of Bangalore. He is currently a member of the indirect tax committee and state taxes committee of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce and Federation of Karnataka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has co-authored a book on GST published by the ICA also. With this brief introduction, I welcome you once again, sir. Over to you.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, sir. Thanks for this opportunity to be able to stand here and speak to all of you today. The topic will be input tax credits. Briefly, I believe that even a day long will not be sufficient to speak about input tax credits, frankly. But let's see how much and how best we can be discussing about those concepts in the input tax credit, not from a legal or from a section rule point of view, because that is available for all of us to read. So let's try and understand what are those pitfalls or hiccups, or what are those good things that are there in the input tax credit today. Straight away getting into that. See, nowadays what I generally do when I speak is, set the, what are we here for basically? Huh? Oh, okay. Thank you. So he's making me look taller. Okay. Fine, thanks. So, one second. Okay. So what are we here for? I'm sure each one of us have have quite a few questions on, whether I'm eligible for input tax credit on this. When do I take that? Is a document that I have sufficient to be able to take a credit? There is something wrong in the invoice. There is something wrong in what my supplier has done. So will I be eligible for credit? Let's try and find out answers for all of those to the extent possible today. I'll not take much time. I promise I'll take only less than a minute for this slide. At a very high level, 1 lakh feet above the ground. Seamless input tax credits is what GST is giving us. In the sense we don't need to really differentiate between goods, services. Initially the thinking was we didn't have to differentiate between capital goods and inputs also. But apparently the way the provisions are, we need to differentiate, but the input credit claim from anything else versus the capital goods. Exports are zero rated, that's fine. Broadly comparable. We often have this case where we have exempt goods, non-business use, etc. So in those cases, yes, the provisions that are there are comparable. But yes, the right side of the slide is what is important. Input tax credit. In fact, before coming here, I was sitting at the institute only. There is this faculty identification program going on. So quite a few of them selected the topic of input tax credits. I heard all of them say, most of them, whoever spoke about input tax credits, say that, it is the biggest thing in GST. Why is it the biggest thing in input tax credit? Because it is seamless, fine. But how does it matter? How does it really matter for us? The aspects which get impacted because of input tax credit are pricing, working capital, cash flows, profitability, accounting, compliance and reporting. So the question is, what else is left? Frankly, nothing. I agree with all what they said, Input tax credit is a very big thing. Simply put, if you don't avail the credits, then your P&L is going to become inefficient. Your cost of operations is going to increase by 18, 12, 28, whatever that percentage is. Working capital. You may have a credit period of 90 days with your customer, with your suppliers. Getting an invoice today, getting the goods today, being able to claim the credit on that today is going to give you free working capital for 90 days. Cash flows needs no explanation. Profitability, we spoke. Accounting. How is accounting going to get impacted because of input tax credits? Simple. All of us have learned those 3 golden rules of accounting: real account, nominal account, personal account. That is not going to change because of GST. So how is accounting going to be impacted today? Right? Initially, about a couple of months back when I attempted this, I was trying to write down how should I account for input tax credits. What is the best way to account? Because you have CGST, SGST, IGST, you have reverse charge, you have TDS, you have TCS, you have different rates of tax, right? You have a requirement of a reversal if you don't pay within 180 days. There are quite a few conditions and requirements in the process of being able to claim, utilize and report the input tax credits. So what is the best scheme of accounting? We were accounting for central excise, we were accounting for VAT, we were accounting for service tax all these days. So how different is it going to be? It is going to be different to a reasonable extent. How many accounts do you think we will need to account input tax credits properly? Ledger account, simple. All of us are champions at that, right? So how many ledger accounts do you think we'll require? HSN code wise, then my accounting tree will never end. 3 accounts. I wish that is true. Whoever said 3, I wish that is true. I've tried my best with my limited knowledge of accounting. 3 months back, I was at 33. 33 ledger accounts is what I believed it is required. Now I've managed to come down to 26 or 27. Right? So, that many are the ledger accounts you will see per state. I repeat, I know it is not to your liking, but that is per state. Each state, I believe, we will be having to operate at least 26 to 27 accounts, ignoring your tax collection at source, which is not yet effective today. Right? If I ignore that, we will still need about 26 or 27 ledger accounts. So that is going to change the way we are accounting. Compliance. Compliance is also going to change. All these days, when I have to claim if I have to claim an input tax credit, take a VAT or a central excise or a service tax. We had to, so long as I have accounted for it, I have an invoice, I was eligible to take a credit. Now, invoice wise, line item wise, I should be able to approve it on my GSTR 2A. Failing which, I will not be able to take a credit. So compliance is also going to be impacted because of input tax credits, the way we are looking at GST. Yes, by all this, I'm not trying to say it is some evil that is coming at us. It's a fantastic thing. Just to add to what Mr. PVS was mentioning, it is like this. Today, all of us appreciate Singapore, right? the way things happen there. Everything is at the touch of a mouse. You know, if you're on a smartphone, it's just on your palm, everything that happens. So if we have to be there in whatever time, I think the start is with all this. The start is rightly with all this. Nothing to hide or nothing to take away from this. Yes, of course, the compliance levels, the expectation from a compliance perspective has increased in GST. No doubt. But I believe personally that this is all in the right direction to be able to talk or compare ourselves with any other country in the times to come. Reporting. That also changes. ठीक है. Madam, you need to tell me when I need to stop. You know, input tax credit. It is all about claiming input tax credit, utilizing it for payment of my output tax. So how many conditions do each of you think that we should really fulfill to be able to claim the credit? 5, 6, 7. We'll count them as it comes. What I've done is I've taken all the conditions, small, big, doesn't matter. All the required conditions to be able to rightfully claim an input tax credit. And I have mapped them into these words, these phrases. So let's take each one of them. From an eligibility point of view. Eligibility. So fine, this is what all of us have learned for years now. It should be inputs or input services or capital goods. It should qualify, it should fulfill the meaning of that. It should be in the course or furtherance of business. Fantastic. In the same breath, can we take one example of what is not in the furtherance of business or what is not in the course of business? Personal use. Personal use. Then it should not be debited to P&L account. Right? If you say it is for personal use, in our accounting language, it should not be debited to P&L account. So something which is debited to P&L account, can we take an example which is not in the course or furtherance of business? Donation. Sir, it is CSR. If I don't comply with CSR, then I will cease to exist. Any example that we can think of? Raw materials. Obviously, it is in the course of business. That is the center of gravity. Plant and machinery, office equipment, your photocopying machine. Is it in the course of business? Is it in the course or furtherance of business? A photocopying machine that you buy for your office. A printer that you buy. Obviously, it is. Then what else? Housekeeping. See, today, the difference between goods and services is gone. It's no longer relevant. Except for the purpose of place of supply, time of supply and other provisions. From an input credit point of view, goods and services don't matter. So let it be services, let it be goods. There is some housekeeping that is happening in your office. Is it in the course or furtherance of business? Yes. Anybody who's saying no, except one friend here nodded his head horizontally. Sir, it is in the course of business. It is in the course of business. Courier, stationery that you buy. Stationery, the food that is given to employees. Is that in the course or furtherance of business? The conveyance facility that you give to your employees to be picked up and dropped every day. Is it in the course or furtherance of business? Yes, it is. So, is there an example that we can think of which is not in the course or furtherance of business? Which is debited to P&L account. Partner remuneration. Sir, there is no GST on that, sir. It is not an inward supply. Event management, staff welfare. Madam, that is also in the course or furtherance of business. That is required. Otherwise, monotony is too much in today's world. Huh? Loss? Sir, that is a business risk. If I want to do something, there is a risk involved in everything. So that is risk. That's very much, of course, nobody will plan for a loss or theft. But yes, it happens. It is in the course of business. Frankly, I am not able to think of anything which is not in the course or furtherance of business. Right? Let's look at it this way also. After all, these words are not very new for us, right? We've looked at these words, maybe in a different context, not from an input tax point of view, but we've looked at it from a taxability point of view. If you go back to your old laws before 30th of June, it said any sale that is in the course of your business is liable to a VAT or a CST. What was that? There you gave an all-inclusive meaning. So even if I sell scrap, it was liable to tax because it is in the course of business. If I sell a byproduct, it was liable. If I sell used furniture, it was in the course of business. Right? So looking at it holistically, I want to believe that anything that is debited to P&L account, we will be eligible to take the credit. If it is not debited to P&L account, fantastic, very good. We ourselves are not telling it is not in the course or furtherance of business, so I don't think we should claim a credit on that. The second one, we should have received the goods and services. Receipt of goods is something which all of us can relate to because it is physical, it is tangible, you can see it move, you can see it being given by one person and received by another. What about services? Is services received? Services are availed. Okay. So, but the law sadly uses the word received. So what is receipt of service then? Right? So let's take an example that there is some maintenance of this premises that is happening. There is one person who comes who certifies saying everything is fit and fine and he goes. There's another person who comes, say we want 2 certificates for whatever reasons. Right? The second person says, no, this part of this electronic gadgets that are lying here are not working. So you've received both the certificates, correct? Yes or no? You've received both the certificates. But so you choose not to use the first one, or you choose not to use one of them, whichever it is. Would you still say it is received, which you have chosen not to use? You have 2 certificates. One says everything is fine. Another says this 10% there is a damage. You've received both. You paid for it. You've paid both the people who have certified that. Has it been received in both the cases? Yes, it is. You have chosen not to use. Right? But it is received. Received. So in a very constructively when we have to look at the law, what is receipt of services? You became aware of it. You've put it to use, you've not put it to use, doesn't matter. You've considered, you've disregarded, doesn't matter. The fact that you've become aware of that, it is sufficient to say that we've received the service. Not specifically restricted. This is your blocked credits in 17. Fairly simple. Now, nature of use. It should be used for taxable output supplies. Whether goods, services, doesn't matter. Fantastic. It should be used for taxable. If it is not taxable, if it is exempt, if it is non-business use, proportionately you have to reduce. There are some formulas which the law has given us, right? We'll come to that also. But essentially, so long the principle is the same. What all of us have grown up with, from a VAT or a central excise point of view. If there is a corresponding output tax payable, then input tax is eligible to be claimed. In the course or furtherance of business, we spoke about it. Credited to electronic credit ledger. What does that mean? All these days, it would actually suffice if I have an invoice, I've received the goods or services, it qualifies, I've recorded it as purchases. Now it says that it should be credited to something called as electronic credit ledger. Electronic credit ledger is ideally, in ideal circumstances, it is a replica of a current asset that we have in our balance sheet. Input tax credit that we have in our balance sheet, electronic credit ledger is meant to be a replica of that. How does it get populated? Fine. I think we've discussed enough and more about all that till now. There is the supplier who's going to file a GSTR1. All that will come and sit into my GSTR2A. I will accept, reject, modify, delete. It will accordingly go and sit in my 2. So the important point here is, unless you see a credit of that in your electronic credit ledger, either because your supplier has filed it as part of his 1 and you've accepted it with or without modifications, or if he's not, you have uploaded it yourself. Unless you do one of this, it will not go into electronic credit ledger. Unless it doesn't go there, we cannot utilize it for the payment of tax. And incidentally, the way, yeah? No, sir. No, sir. The formats and the formats actually support saying you can utilize the combination of 1 and 2. But actually, in principle, I don't think it should be allowed to be utilized, because the law also requires that RCM tax has to be first paid, and once you pay, it becomes eligible for a credit. If you have paid on the 30th of the previous month, then you will be eligible to utilize it for the discharge of the tax liability of the very same month. But if you've paid it only on 20th of the next month, then you have to wait for the next cycle for it to be. Sorry? So, but look at it this way. Look at it this way. When am I paying the liability? I'm paying only on 20th. Okay? I'm paying the liability only on 20th of a month.
Yeah.
On 20th is when it becomes eligible to be claimed as a credit.
Yes. Then only after that, what is my output liability? Then I'm adjusting it.
So going by that analogy, then the purchases that I've made on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of the month also, I should be of the next month. See, for July, my liability was payable on 20th of August. So purchases which I've made on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of August also, I should be able to utilize for the liability which I'm paying on 20th. Right? I think we should essentially look at it as a tax period. What I became eligible of within 1st and 30th of the month, I have the time to file a return till 20th, which is your 10, 15 and 20. I would look at it that way. While yes, there is one school of thought, which says the day I discharge the liability on 30th, then it is deemed that it was discharged on 30th of the last month only. It is just the time that is given for 20 days for me to pay. The minute I discharge on 20th, everything goes back to the last day of the previous month. But yes, I would still want to believe and support the view that, claim it in the next month. Else what happens? For the limited purpose of computation, arithmetically, you will add this amount as part of output tax. Output tax minus input tax is equal to my net tax. I will add this to my output tax of the month, right? I already have an input tax credit that I have in respect of my purchases. Let's take a service sector for that matter who have predominantly exports. So they don't have output tax, but they have a reverse charge tax to be paid. Going by that analogy, I have a lakh of rupees that I have to pay for reverse charge, gets added to my output tax, but when I'm filing the return on 20th, I have input tax that I've accumulated for the month of July itself. Then I should be able to discharge that reverse charge tax without having to pay anything at all.
No, but it is under law, I have to pay cash only.
Correct. Which is why it actually this argument that you told now, saying it is there in the law, supports my view. Saying you first pay, then you take a credit. The day I make the payment, see what is one of the conditions for me to be able to take the RCM credit? I should pay. When did I pay? On 20th. So it is only on 20th that I become eligible to take the credit. That's the way I would want to look at it. Compliance rating of the supplier. Yeah? Agreed. Sir, first I should pay. See, there are a couple of conditions that I need to fulfill to take a credit.
Is it 1 second is sufficient? For example, 20th morning I will pay, 20th afternoon I can take the credit?
No.
Why?
20th morning when you pay, when did you fulfill the condition for you to take the credit? On 20th.
20th for the month of previous month.
That 20th is unfortunately in the next month. But you are discharging the liability for the previous month.
Law has given a time for me to discharge that particular liability.
Fair point. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. Perfect. Law has given us time till 20th.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
But the law also says you should first pay. But yes, there is one argument to support your view, which says, which was there in the service tax law, which is not there in the GST, SENVAT rather, not service tax, SENVAT, which said the credits that you can utilize to discharge the liability are only those credits which you were entitled to till the last day of the previous month. Equivalent. I'm putting it in English words rather than legal terminology. The law said you will be eligible to take the credits, all that accumulated to you till 30th of the previous month. That condition is not there in the GST law, which was apparently there in the SENVAT.
While filing GSTR 3B itself, it allowed me to take that particular reverse charge credit.
I agree. The 1, 2, 3, both in the form and in electronic form, apparently allows you to take that credit. It is allowing you to take that credit.
If I have only reverse charge credit, yes, I have to discharge in cash. Then I am eligible to take that credit in the subsequent month. If I have an extra output which I have to discharge in the form of cash, I have an input tax only to maybe 30% extent of my output. So the balance, whatever I discharge in the form of cash to meet my reverse charge liability, I can take the same in the same month itself. That's what my
Sir, the form
views.
allows you. But where probably I am stuck in my thinking is, when did we pay that? On 20th. So when did you become eligible to take the credit? On 20th.
Apply the same logic for the, say for example, I'm providing output service. Somebody has to, I have to file my GSTR1. That will appear in GSTR2, right? The other person, he is eligible to take that credit, right? When he is eligible to take credit, I will discharge my liability on 20th only.
He is.
When the other person is eligible to take that particular credit?
On the day he purchases.
Correct, right? I have not discharged my liability on the 30th or 31st of the previous month.
I would look at it this way. That was never my liability. That is vendor's liability. That is vendor's liability. Which is why even they say that it is provisionally allowed. It is only after 20th that you will be given a MIS1 and MIS2, which actually says whether it is final
So that
or
person
not.
also discharging his liability on 20th is what I'm trying to say.
In form, I agree with you, because GSTR 1 and 2 is allowing what you told. It is allowing you to set off. But from a very strict letter and spirit reading of the law, I believe it should be taken next month. That is more logical in my mind to be able to take it the next month.
Thank you. I have a different view.
But in
Sure.
Twitter answers, they
one
have
more thing, what I was saying was, the most of it, what you say, the services like the reverse charge of the transport and all, it is already added in the bill. Like if you purchase for 20, 2 rupees the transport, 22.
Sir,
you
what
have,
you are-
no,
no,
you
no,
have
no, no,
sold
no.
for 24.
What you are
then
liable
the GST
to-
what comes is already the 24 what you have sold comes along with the payment of 24 only. The 2 rupees under reverse charge what you are paying is just a display to say that you have paid transportation and again claiming back. You already paid tax on the 24. 20 is your purchase plus 2 is your transport. 22 becomes your cost. Actually, you should have been eligible to take credit up to 22. What you are paying is output 24. You have
Fair.
plus your margin.
I am not denying.
So
I
it
agree
is
with
all,
you.
the system is already there where you have already paid on 24. Now what you are claiming is the difference between your shoe is the accounting shoe which you are showing to
Fair point.
credit and claim.
Fair point.
So that's why you should be able to claim on the same day. Same applies. What is applicable before 30th?
The way...
It's tantamount to be paid before 30th.
No, not like that. The way I am looking at it is you should fulfill the condition to be able to take a credit.
Yes, the
I am
condition itself,
fulfilling-
when you have paid tax on 24, the condition is already fulfilled.
No.
When you pay tax on 24, which
I am
is including
fulfilling-
transport,
I am
the condition is
fulfilling
already
that
fulfilled. You have paid on the whole value.
I will be fulfilling that condition only in the next month. The day you fulfill the condition, you become eligible for credit. On 20th, you became eligible for
Nice, Saab.
credit.
You see, before 20th, you are eligible to take credit of your purchase as well, and you are paying on your sale. You are supposed to pay the additional GST only
Fair.
of your margin.
Fair
Then
point.
why these 2 rupees you have
Fair
to
point.
keep in suspense?
Fair point. That's what. The form allows you. The
Not
form is allowing
No,
you.
not the form. The system is allowing it. It's not the form.
Fair
the form may be applicable
Sir,
on...
by form I meant
It is the
the-
system. They know the
No, no.
system. You
The
already
form-
paid on 24. You have paid on 24. They know it. You have paid the additional GST or 24 which the other man is eligible to claim.
By form,
Like if
I
there are
didn't mean, by form here I didn't mean GSTR 1, 2, 3. I meant in form it is allowing, in substance, I believe we should take it in the next month. As he said, that's a point of view. Right? The next one is, compliance rating of the supplier. Today there is no such condition that is there in the law, which said, if the compliance rating of your supplier is below a threshold, you're not eligible to any credit in respect of purchases that you make from him. But today, when you look at a compliance rating, as Mr. PVS was mentioning in the last few minutes, there is only one line which is called compliance rating. Saying there will be a compliance rating in the context of compliance rating and anti-profiteering is what he mentioned, is what I understand, right? There is only one line in the law which says there will be a compliance rating of all of us. So what is the use that you're going to put it to? What are the parameters that are going to be used to determine what is the compliance rating? How frequently will it change? All this is not there today. We don't know how frequently it will be done, what are the parameters, what is the use they'll put it to. It's like a CIBIL rating. Today if my CIBIL rating is low, I know only one impact. There may be more, but I am aware of only one. No bank will give me a loan. Right? So don't know what the impact of the compliance rating is going to be going forward. So be sensitive to this one aspect practically from a business point of view, to be, to be able to capture and look at the compliance rating of the supplier at regular intervals. Quite possible. After 2 years, the government may come back and say, look, if the compliance rating is on a scale of 1 to 10, it is below 4, then you're not eligible for a credit. In a disguised form, we have it in VAT, we have it in service tax. Right? So you don't know. So be aware of this one aspect as we go forward. Not demanded due to fraud. This is one change from how a VAT and a service tax used to operate versus how it is in GST. Suppose there was some reverse charge on import of service. Import of service, I believed it was not liable to tax, so I didn't pay. Subsequently, there was an audit by the tax office. They said, look, Badri, you're liable to pay on this. Okay, I paid. For whatever reasons, I paid. I didn't want to dispute materiality. Doesn't matter the reason. We paid with interest. So what would we do with the tax? We would take a credit. Only the interest would have gone as a debit to your P&L account. The tax part of it, we would have taken a credit on that, subject to our eligibility, of course. The difference between the old and the new law, which is GST now, is that if there is any tax which becomes payable due to any of these audits, inspections, etc., we will not be eligible to take a credit on that. Unlike the old law. Not just the interest part, but even the tax, we will not be eligible to credit at all. So being aggressive on, a classic example is reverse charge. Being aggressive on reverse charge may not be warranted because you pay and you take a credit. Right? So also, at the same time, in the same breath, over-conservatism is also not good. I keep giving these examples whenever I speak. Earlier, under the central excise law, there were various, processes which didn't qualify as manufacture. In 1980s, there was one such provision where, if I have a rod, a thick rod, a 10-inch rod or something like that. I extract wire out of that. That was not a manufacture those days. Those days it was not manufacture. But essentially, I buy a rod, I make a wire, I sell it. These are all B2B transactions. Which means there is a use for a central excise that is contained in that. It is not a cost of the supply chain. Right? So there was one company which was called Technoweld. This is a reported case. Technoweld. What they did was, they said, look, I buy the rod, I extract wire out of it, I sell it. It is not manufactured, but doesn't matter, I'll pay excise. It is not manufactured, doesn't matter, I will still pay excise. Which means what? I took the credit of the excise that was contained in the rod that I bought. I discharged excise duty on my output, which is wire. And my customer, who is in turn a business, has a use for central excise, he took the credit. Right? So in this you are beating the system. Right? So the tax office very heavily came back. They said, look, what you're doing is not manufacture. It is not liable to excise. So you don't have to pay excise. But I've collected and paid. I collected excise from my customer to whom I sold wire, so that is forfeited. Because it is not excise, you are never liable to pay, but because you've collected, it is forfeited. On the other hand, they said, look, what you're doing is not manufacture. You've wrongly collected excise does not make it right. Because what you do is not manufacture, SENVAT credit rules also doesn't apply to you, which means input tax not allowed. You understood? They disallowed input tax on one side, they forfeited the output tax on the other, they chased my customer down, they told him that, look, what your supplier is paying is not excise. He may call it excise, but it is not excise. God knows what it is, but it is not excise. So even in his hands, they said SENVAT doesn't apply. Right? So there was a three-way impact on this instead of one. This actually went up to the parliament in 2000 not able to recollect exactly, 2003 or 4, the SENVAT credit rules got amended to regularize this transaction, saying, look, though it was not manufacture, just to enable transfer of credit and not to lose the central excise benefit in the entire supply chain, we will call it manufacture with retrospective effect. SENVAT credit rules got amended. There was this provision which was brought in, which means what? Apply the same analogy today. Where something is not taxable, in the guise of over-conservatism, if we pay, we will also have to face this as a challenge. So, idea is, let's pay where it is payable. Neither aggression nor conservatism. That was the idea of this, sharing this condition. Utilization is as defined. There is a 5-layered approach in terms of how we utilize. The GSTR 1 and 2 and even the Excel utilities take care of this adjustment, so nothing much to do as far as we are concerned, except accounting and utilization in our accounting softwares. Charged on the supply. There should be a tax which is charged on the supply, either on the reverse charge or forward charge, doesn't matter. We are eligible for both the credits. Should be in GSTR 2, we spoke about it. Not composition tax, fantastic. Composition tax paid at the time of purchase, it will not be in the invoice, but even if we are not eligible. No depreciation under the Income Tax Act for capital goods, we know that. Let me not take too much of time on that. Paid within 180 days. I should pay within 180 days. 180 days from when? From the date of my invoice. So, it is like this oxymoron, the way the law is drafted. It says, if I fail to pay within 180 days, okay? Failure arises when? Failure means what? Simple English. Failure means what? I was supposed to do something but I didn't do. That is what is failure. Correct? I was never supposed to pay him within 180 days. My credit period is 250. So can you take the argument saying it is not a failure at all? See, you can call it a failure only when I don't do something which I was supposed to. But my case is, I have a fantastic purchase team. They've negotiated 1 year credit period with my supplier. Possible, right? So I don't pay him. So can you call it a failure to pay? If the language in the law stopped at failure to pay, then this understanding would have been right. But it goes on to say failure to pay within 180 days from the date of invoice. So unfortunately, however strong your purchase team is, whatever negotiation they do with your suppliers, 180 days stays. But the difference here, see, not that we are seeing this condition for the first time. This was there in service tax law. There it was 90, here it has become 180. There it was applicable only, in the old law it was applicable only for services. Now it has become applicable for goods and services. Unfortunately, full 10 out of 10 for your purchase team, but we have to reverse the credit if we don't pay within 180 days. But the sad part here is we have to reverse it with interest. With interest. So there is one school of thought here. Rather, all of us are reading the law together, the more number of questions that that you come across, the more cases that you see, your thinking also changes with all that. So one kind of thinking is, I have a purchase, I don't want to pay interest. I am not interested in paying interest. I don't want that interest payment in my P&L account. Right? So what do? I purchased in the month of say September. I take the credit. I accept it in my 2A. So it goes into my electronic credit ledger. I take the credit. Then next month, no, same month, I reverse it also. So there is a claim that I've done. Correct? There is a claim that I've done, but I've not utilized. Is that okay? Second, I don't claim at all. It is appearing in my 2A. I don't claim. I have time till next September. If I'm talking September 17, I have time till September 18 to be able to claim a credit. I'll pay within 1 year. So, can I take a credit only when I pay? Two options. So that I don't pay interest. I don't like interest in my P&L account. There are a few people who think like that. Right? So, is it okay in these cases? I take the credit only when I pay. What is the implication of that? It is perfectly legal. It is appearing in my 2A. From there it goes into my 2 also, but I don't utilize the credit. I don't take the credit. Rather, one more, third variation. Can I claim the credit but not utilize? Will you agree to that? All the three have their own set of challenges. Can I defer it till the date of payment? Of course you can. There is nobody to stop you. But it will continue as a mismatch between one of your vendor and two of yours. It will continue to be a mismatch. Now, go back to this last box here, left side. Compliance rating. Will it impact my compliance rating because it's a mismatch? Maybe. We don't know that today. We don't know. So that is one aspect that is a problem with this method. The second option was, I claim today, I reverse, I reclaim it later. Perfectly all right. I can't think of a negative there, except that you're losing free working capital. Third one, I claim but I don't utilize. Can I do that? I have not spent so much of time on the Excel utility, so whoever has spent should correct me on this. I understand that whatever is there in my electronic credit ledger, I have to utilize that first. You understood? I have to utilize that. Only the balance is taken from my cash ledger. So if I have a lakh of rupees in my credit ledger, I cannot claim only 80 and pay 20 through cash ledger. I believe the system doesn't allow you to maintain a balance in your credit and pay out of your cash ledger. It allows, is it? Okay. Initially I was told that. Okay, I stand corrected. So if it is allowing, then very good, you can do that also. You claim that, but don't utilize. But will it insulate you from interest? Unfortunately, no. It will not insulate us from interest in that situation. Within 1510 or the date of annual return, okay, we know that. The upper limit within which we have to really claim the credit. If received in lots, yeah. Sorry? Sir, in case of import, 180 days not applicable only. Because in case of import, you have to pay IGST and bring it into India. So the minute you pay, you become eligible. To my knowledge, 180 days doesn't apply for import transactions. For reverse charge. Technically for reverse charge, it doesn't apply. If received in lots, only after we receive the last lot, we can take the credit. Fantastic. Documentation point of view, I should be in possession of a tax invoice. All of us know that. Paid to the government including RCM, we spoke about that. Should have filed the return. I hear both ways. Whenever I get into any discussion or hear somebody speak about all this. Who should file a return to be able to take a credit? Is it the supplier or the recipient? This condition is there in section 16. Right? He should have filed a valid return is what the law says. Who is that he in this? Is it a vendor, the person whom I am buying from, or is it me who is taking the credit? Sir, in section 16, the he means only me. The he is only me, not the vendor. The vendor's requirement of filing the return comes because of your matching concept and your 30-day time limit, etc. But if you limit your reading to section 16, where they say he should have filed a valid return or whatever that language is, the he there is me, the claimant, the person who is claiming the input tax credit. No, sir. Let me read that out. Sir, section 16, if you read, it starts with notwithstanding anything contained in this section, no registered person shall be entitled to credit, which means what? They are talking about the recipient. In respect of any supply of goods or services to him, which is recipient, unless he has filed a return. He is me only. It is not the supplier. If the intention was, see, I hear a lot of them relate to this condition as the supplier should have filed a valid return. Yes, the supplier should have filed a valid return. I am not denying that. That requirement doesn't come because, that condition doesn't get imposed on us because of section 16. It comes because of the matching concept, the matching principle that is there in the GST provisions. So that is where that condition comes from. This is how we have to utilize the input tax credits. If the output tax is IGST, then I can use IGST, CGST or SGST to pay. This is how it is. All of us would have, seen this everywhere. We have started doing it also. Just as a reference, the step by step, how to utilize the input tax credit, I have just attempted to put it in this manner for use of everybody. Let me go to the next one. Computation of net eligible credits, which means what? I have a credit of ₹1,00,000. How do I really claim the credit? See, there are these formulas in your 42 and 43. Rules 42 and 43, they say TC, TO, TR, C1, C2, all that. Sorry, but to me it sounds like one of those chemistry formulas, right? So let's put it in simple English that we are able to compute. Very simply in form of a flowchart which all of us in our profession relate to. Total GST on all inward supplies for a month. You bucket them into three categories. One is where they are exclusively attributable to a specific activity. Second is they are blocked credits under your 17. Then third one is common credits. In the first box, whatever is for taxable supplies is one box. Non-taxable and exempt is one. Other than business, zero rated. Red means you are not eligible. Green means you are eligible. 100% of the credit you are eligible. That's what it means. Now, common credits, what do I do? Not very complicated at all. Common credits, some do's and don'ts. It is the same formula that all of us have lived with under SENVAT credit rules. Exempt turnover by taxable turnover. Common credit, whatever is there, into exempt by taxable is the disallowed portion. That has to be reversed. Unlike the SENVAT credit rules, in the GST, they say you apply the ratio of exempt to total of the relevant month only. And if you don't have anything of the relevant month, then apply the previous tax period. Of course, like a VAT, like a SENVAT, this also says you true it up by applying the annual ratio at the end of the year before you file the September return. Separately, we have to do it for CGST, SGST and IGST. This computation, this flowchart that you are seeing. Non-business purposes, if common credits are used for non-business purposes, they say you reverse 5% on an ad hoc basis. This is what is the chemistry I was telling you. Right? They call it T1, T2, C1, C2, etc. But if we want to look at an Excel statement, this is how ideally we compute it. I mean, this is there as part of the slides. Oh, sorry, I don't think this is there as part of the slides. I did it only last evening. I'll request if it can be uploaded, right? Capital goods credits. How different is Rule 42 and 43 of input tax credits? Is there a difference at all? The inputs also is relatable to your taxable or non-taxable activities, common, blocked credits, etc. The same is as far as capital goods is concerned. For exempt and other than business, for taxable and zero rated common credits. Again, color coding is green means you are eligible, red means you please reverse, don't claim. Okay? But essentially, from common credit, what will you do? For inputs and input services, they said you apply the month ka ratio, true it up or true it down at the end of the year based on annual figures before you file the return for the month of September. Capital goods, what do you do? Capital goods obviously, see here, capital goods does not mean what is defined. Capital goods means what we capitalize in our books. That is what is capital goods as far as GST is concerned. Right? So the law says, you take this over a 60-month period, 5 years. If it is wholly for taxable and zero rated supplies, you please claim day one, everything is allowed. Common credits, how will you claim? The difference is in the way it is computed and it is the way it is reversed or repaid. Both the greens here, you will be able to claim and utilize in the month in which you do it first, subject to those all other conditions that we saw, right? I have bought a plant and machinery which is worth 1 crore. I have paid 18 lakhs of credit. It is meant for making some life-saving drugs and medicine which is taxable. Common, it's a common machinery that I have. Okay? Life-saving is exempt. Some of the life-saving drugs are exempt, whereas largely the medicines are taxable at 12. I have both, for which I have a machinery that I have common machinery. 18 lakhs of credit, what do? In month 1, I take the full 18 lakhs of credit. I will be able to set it off against the output tax that I am liable to pay for that month also, though it is common. Whereas, then what is the difference between taxable and zero rated and common? The difference lies in how you treat it in the next 60 months. They say 18 lakhs divided by 60. Whatever that number is. That is the credit attributable to that particular tax period. Take that as the common credit and apply this formula. This, whatever we said, exempt turnover by taxable turnover. Right? Say for that month, the common credit is say lakh of rupees. For a minute, assume it is 60 lakhs. So a lakh of rupees is the common credit for that month. On that lakh of rupees, I will apply exempt turnover by total turnover for the next 60 months. And every month, whatever becomes red, which is basically exempt turnover, I have to repay in essence. I have to repay. If I don't have any output tax in that month, I repay. In the GSTR 2, there is one table towards the last, I don't know the table number, which talks about a disallowance which has to be added to the output tax liability under 43.1, Rule 43.1. This is that amount which has to be determined on a month-on-month basis. This is how we see the difference here is, the difference that we have to understand is, look, in month 1, you take the full 60 lakhs as credit. Over the next 59 months, you keep repaying it to the extent it relates to exempted turnover. The law also provides, there are these two situations also law provides. When you buy, it was meant for exempt. Subsequently, it became common. So they say, per quarter, 5% of the input tax credit that you originally paid, the GST that you paid at the point of purchase, the net amount, put it into common credit, which means you take in that month, and for the balance of the period, 60 minus whatever is lapsed, the same formula you apply month after month and repay to the government. Right? Which means what? All these details have to be maintained line item wise on your Excels or whatever other tools that you use. GSTN doesn't track this. Your filing of 2, 1 and 2 and 3, where the half of 2 and full of 3 is auto-populated. This is not part of auto-population based on some formula. While it could have been done, apparently I don't see it. Right? So this calls for that additional records to be maintained for a period of 60 months for every asset that you purchase. Rather, every goods that you capitalize in your books of accounts. This is one thing which I have attempted to show pictorially on how to secure your credits. There is this, condition where my supplier has to file a return. If he doesn't file a return, I am not eligible to credits. Right? I buy in the month of January. As our friend there said, look, he also pays only next month. Yes, he pays next month, but I am eligible for credit in the month of January itself. There are various situations which are out of my control as a recipient. He doesn't file a return. He doesn't upload my invoice. I upload my invoice, but subsequently he doesn't accept it. There is a difference. It could be any of these. It could be he has uploaded wrongly. He has uploaded an invoice with a lakh of rupees as the value, but actually he's missed out a zero. It is 10 lakhs. Possible. All these are possible. And please expect that in the next 6 months. Right? So I will correct it at my end when I am filing my return. Does it end there? Is that credit which I take sacrosanct? No, it is not. In all these cases, you have a window of 30 days. Right? So essentially, from a compliance point of view, how is our life going to be when we are looking at the GST compliance function? Between 1 and 10, you should prepare for filing your outward supply details. Of course, subject to all these, 10th becoming 25th, every day there is a notification extending the due date. Right? Quite possible it is going to be extended beyond tomorrow also. Yourself to file the outward details between 1st and 10th. Between 10th and 15th, what do you do? As an outward supplier, when you are supplying goods to me, once you filed a return on 10th, you cannot touch that again between 10th and 15th. You cannot touch that because it is in my dashboard where I have to accept the purchases or add, delete, amend, do what I want. I will do that between 10th and 15th. What has come into my 2A and what is not coming to my 2A, which is reverse charge and adjustment through debit credit notes and imports, I will upload that between 10th and 15th. Between 15th and 17th, what will happen? The system will match. On 16th morning, the system is going to match what I have accepted or I have uploaded, etc., with what you have done. If what you did is what I have accepted, then life is fine. Nothing to worry. You had uploaded a lakh, but I made it 10 lakhs. Then between 15th and 16th, this will come as a mirror to your dashboard. You have to accept or reject it. If you accept it, life is fine. It is matched. If you don't accept it, then what happens? If you don't accept it, your output tax liability for that month will be a lakh. My input tax credit on the very same invoice for that month will be, my input tax for that very month will be 10 lakh rupees. It will be 10 lakhs, though you have not accepted it. Right? What happens in this case is, both of us will file the returns. Both of us will file the returns. That is on 20th. On 20 lakhs, everything matched, life is fine. The other 5 lakhs, not matched. So from 20th morning, 21st morning, till 20th of the next month, you and I have time to agree, disagree, fight, do what we want. Right? One of us agrees, fine. As far as the system is concerned, it will get accepted. But if we maintain, if I am not able to convince you saying, look, you had ignored a zero and you are not correcting it now, then what happens? On the 20th of the next month, when I am filing a return for the subsequent month, that 9 lakhs gets added from my output to my output tax liability. So though I claimed 9 lakhs last month, this month I'm going to repay that with interest. With interest. Right? So this definitely requires, from a business point of view, from a compliance function point of view, all of us should be on the top of all these differences. You have a 30-day time limit. See, here there is no manual intervention. It is all system driven. There is no manual intervention. Right? So you have a 30-day window to address all these differences. Right? So this is how the life will be for the compliance function under GST. So in this, what at least my thinking says is, I am dependent on my vendor for my input tax credit, though I have paid him. Correct? So one way of looking at it from a business point of view, right, is that, look, my credit terms with you, with my vendor is what it is. That is not going to change. Okay? But only the tax element. Look at this in this case where, the invoice, I have paid the 10 lakh rupees to my vendor, but I am eligible only for a lakh of rupees of credit. Because I am not able to convince my vendor saying he has to go back and correct that transaction. So I am at loss. So rather look at it this way by saying the credit terms for the goods and service will remain what it is. If that was advance, the value of the service will remain advance, no problem. If the credit period was 15 days, so be it, it remains 15 days. But the tax amount in that invoice, I will pay you only after I get a confirmation in MIS1. So your invoice processing from an accounting point of view will happen in 2 stages. If your credit limit is more than 45 days. Right? You could probably consider this as a clause in your purchase orders for all your clients, for all your respective purchases. Right? You could probably consider introducing a clause saying, look, I'm going to pay you the tax amount only after I get a confirmation in MIS1. And for MIS1, you are not at the mercy of anybody. The system is going to give you. On 21st morning, you'll have a MIS1 in your inbox, on your dashboard. See that. If he has paid, pay him. Because once you get a confirmation in MIS1, there is no taking back of that credit for whatever reasons. So maybe you want to consider that. I have got a diktat here saying 10 minutes. So the last 2 slides are these. I'll take another 5-7 minutes, sir. Just random questions that all of us, I'm sure, will have practically. What is the earliest we can take the credit? On receipt of the invoice. All of you agree? But I should have received the goods also. I should have received the goods or services. So one classic example here is, what happens to AMCs? AMC, as the name itself says, it is annual maintenance contract. Which means from, say, April of this year to March of next year, I will keep receiving the service. Correct? So when do I take a credit? And of course, the billing is advance. Not even April. The AMC supplier would have given me the invoice of March of last year only. For the period of AMC which is April to March. So if I'm talking March, say January to December 18 is my AMC. I will get the invoice for that as a recipient in December only. Can I take a credit in December? No. Then when do I take? Proportionately. Sir, system doesn't allow me to take proportionately, sir. I accept the invoice, then it goes and sits in my electronic credit ledger and I'll use it. If the credit there is 12,000 rupees, I cannot claim 1,000 now, 1,000 next month, 1,000 month after that. I cannot claim it in piecemeal. I either claim full or don't claim at all. So how will you address this situation? There I claim the full amount in month 1, but I repay every month. I repay every month. That is the difference between Rule 42 and 43. So how will you address an AMC credit? Monthly bill. Sir, your vendor will probably not want to work with you if you ask him for 12 invoices. So how do you resolve this? Because operationally, see, legally you take 10,000 every month, obviously you're fine, there is nothing wrong in that. But the system doesn't allow you to take 10,000 every month, or whatever that number is. Right? So now AMCs, lot of AMCs are changing. They are shifting to a quarterly billing, if not monthly. So I don't have to wait for 1 year to take a credit. At the end of the quarter I'll take. right? So you may also want to look at changing the billing cycle for your AMCs. For, probably not call it AMC, call it quarterly or monthly, whatever. Number of ledger accounts we spoke. RECO between ERPs and GSTR2. Very, 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 very important. And reconciliations, for all of us, it needs no explanation. In case of doubt whether it is eligible or not, what to do? I have a genuine doubt whether I can take credit on this or no. Huh? Take it, don't use it, will also trigger interest. So that is the understanding here. Relating to one unit but claimed elsewhere. What happens in that case? Wrong claim, that's all. Simple. What is the implication of that? Wrong claim, I agree. But how will it impact your P&L account? There are two implications on your P&L. One is you will be asked to reverse where you have taken with interest, and in the other place you will not get. Because this would have been a case where you would have identified because of some audit, inspection, etc., etc. So gone. You will not get it in the other place. So being careful is the key. Capturing compliance rating, I spoke. It's a future thing. We don't know how they are going to put it to use, but be sensitive to that compliance rating. Once claimed and utilized, can the tax office still dispute? Of course they can. Where is the doubt? But for what conditions they will dispute? They cannot dispute it saying, I have not filed a return, my vendor has not filed a return. For what aspect can they dispute? See, if we go back to this slide, there are so many conditions. Which condition in this can they dispute for? Blocked credits or ineligible, exempted. Eligibility they can question, not documentation or anything else. Bills with service tax coming now. All of us would have heard these n number of cases, right? Even today in September, I see invoices of service tax. So what to do? No, can I take a credit? I am the recipient. So will you give me credit? Will you give it to me in GSTR 1 or TRAN 1? Huh? TRAN 1 or GSTR 1? GSTR 1 obviously no. TRAN 1? Can I? There is this 140 bracket 5 which provides for a 30-day cap time limit within which you have to record so long as it is a service which was provided, which was taxed earlier, but you received it now. See, there is something called goods in transit. That is what 140 bracket 5 meant for. But they have said goods are services. Right? So, in my knowledge, I don't know what is services in transit. But yes, I've seen people wanting to claim under 140 bracket 5. There is this 142.11c, very unique clause. Sorry sir, few more minutes. I just have 2 or 3 more questions. 142.11c, it says what? It says, look, if you've paid a service tax and a VAT under the old law, for which the supply is happening now, then the law says you pay GST because supply is happening now, but take a credit of a VAT and a service tax that you paid earlier. Okay? What can be this transaction? Advance for, sir? Sir, if that was the case, if I've received advance for one of the, say, some work that I'm doing in June, I would have not only paid service tax in June, but I would have issued the invoice also in June only. I would have issued also invoice then only, no? Because under the old law, the law required us to issue an invoice, whether it is a VAT or a service tax, it required us to issue an invoice in the old law. Sir, that's a very long discussion. Let me not take it up now. I was required to, you see, if I have paid tax, I was required to issue an invoice. Okay. There are some transactions. Okay. There is some case. Now, the law also gives us a time limit. In Tran 1, it requires us to disclose these transactions because we have to take a credit of a VAT and a service tax that we've paid in the earlier law. Which means what? If I've received an advance in June, I have to issue an invoice within 28th of September. 28th of September is the upper limit to file a Tran 1. That is when the 90 days ends. But genuinely, I have not supplied service till now. I am going to supply the service only in December. What do I do in that case? At least I don't have an answer for this. Because while the intent of law is very clearly appreciated, apparently the form doesn't support us, the Tran 1. Because Tran 1 upper limit is 28th and I'm required to disclose it here. If I don't disclose it in Tran 1, there is no other window where I can take the credit of a VAT and a service tax that I've paid earlier. Right? That is one. Okay. So these are, I think, all of us will have the answers. I've overshot. So thank you. Thanks everyone to have heard me for the last slightly more than an hour. Thank you so much. It was very nice. Sure, please, sir.
Yes, it was a very useful discussion, sir. We have come to an end of interesting session on issues and insights on input tax credit. I thank Badrinath sir for his time and efforts enriching our knowledge. Give him a big round of applause. I thank on behalf of Bangalore branch of ICA, may I request our Secretary Shivram Bhatt to present a memento to the speaker as a token of gratitude. Thank you, Shivram Bhatt. Thank you, sir. Now we will break for lunch and we will reassemble by 2:30 for a third technical session. Thank you.